tonight. Businessman Donald Trump.
Right from the jump tonight, Donald Trump made waves.
Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Mr. Trump.
I cannot say I can totally make that pledge. If I'm the nominee, I will pledge I will not run as an independent.
So tonight you can't say if another one of these...
This is what's wrong. I mean, This is what's wrong. He buys and sells politicians of all stripes. He's used to buying politicians.
Well, I've given him plenty of money.
You're not going to make the pledge tonight?
I will not make the pledge at this time.
Okay.
A few other candidates said a few other things, and then 21 minutes in, it was back to Trump for another doozy.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't. For the record, it was well beyond Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Your Twitter account has several disparaging comments about women's looks.
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct.
Moments later, Rosie herself weighed in on Twitter, quote, "Try explaining that to your kids." The testiest moment of the night didn't involve Trump, but instead New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. It was over the NSA's bulk data collection, which Christie supports and Paul does not.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans.
When you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that.
You fundamentally misunderstand the Bill of Rights. I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right ahead.
Go ahead, Governor.
And you know, Senator Paul, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th.
To be sure, there was plenty of Hillary Clinton bashing tonight.
If Hillary is the candidate, which I doubt, that would be a dream come true.
If I'm our nominee, how is Hillary Clinton going to lecture me about living paycheck to paycheck?
Everywhere in the world that Hillary Clinton touched is more messed up today than before she and the
We have many questions to come.
Here in the same arena in Cleveland, where the Republican Party will hold its national convention next year. But perhaps the most bizarre riff on Hillary came from the Donald, who talked about why he contributed to her in the past.
With Hillary Clinton, I said, be at my wedding, and she came to my wedding. You know why? She had no choice.
It was a bit of a tough night at times for Jeb Bush. The former governor of Florida seemed to struggle on issues such as immigration, education, and once again, the Iraq War. But he did stay above the fray when offered a chance to attack Trump.
You called Mr. Trump a clown, a buffoon, something else that cannot be repeated on television.
None of which is true.
Is it true?
No, it's not true. But I have said that Mr. Trump's language is divisive. I want to win. I want one of these people here, or the ones at 5 o'clock, to be the next president of the United States.
Well, first of all, Jeb, I am very happy that you denied that, and I appreciate that very much.
So how did the debate go over with Republican voters? We got some rapid response tonight.
If you won't say it, I will.
From Tomi Lahren, a young political commentator who's become a viral sensation on YouTube in recent weeks. Tonight she weighed in on all things Trump.
We know Donald Trump tells it like it is. He's not afraid of it. What I saw, though, is Donald Trump be fearless. I didn't see him back himself into a corner. I saw him challenge Megyn Kelly. I saw him challenge other Republicans on the stage. And then I saw Megyn Kelly challenge him right back. I like the conversation there.
And ABC's Tom Llamas was right there in Cleveland tonight for all the drama. Tom, what are you seeing there?
Dan, good evening from the post-debate spin room where candidates are answering even more questions. The big buzz, obviously, that Donald Trump is not afraid to run without the Republican Party, refusing to take a pledge that he will not run as an independent. The other big buzz, some candidates actually breaking through. Besides Donald Trump, Dr. Ben Carson, the second most talked about candidate on social media. And speaking of social media, Hillary Clinton had something to say. Jon Stewart, missing you already. Hashtag GOP debate. Dan, back to you.
Tom Llamas on the ground in Cleveland tonight. Thank you. We want to turn now to our colleague Matt Dowd, ABC News political analyst, and also BuzzFeed's Washington, D.C. bureau chief John Stanton. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Let me start with you. Did Donald Trump help or hurt himself tonight?
I think Donald Trump had momentum coming into tonight, but I think over the course of the 2 hours, I think it's worth sort of thin over this, and I think any momentum, in my view, that he had coming in is stopped by tonight. I think he made a few errors in the course of tonight, some of the engagement that he had with some of the moderators, but I think what he did, he'll still be ahead coming out, but I think any momentum is now stalled because of his shtick. Kind of got a little old over 2 hours.
So, John, you work at BuzzFeed. I've got to ask you, do you have a sense of what is popping tonight, what's going viral, if anything?
I think there are a couple things. I think one, the eye roll from Rand Paul was kind of amazing in his fight with Governor Christie. I think the Donald Trump sort of the shruggy emoticon moment there was pretty good because they both sort of sum up, I think, their debate performances, frankly. But I think coming out of today, Carly Fiorina, who did very, very well in the afternoon debate, and the Ohio Governor Kasich, he did very, very well tonight. And I think they're going to have momentum, and that could change the dynamic a little bit for Trump.
Why are people so excited about Carly?
Carly Fiorina will be in the next debate. I think she has enough momentum from her earlier debate. By all accounts, she won it overwhelmingly. And I think there was enough people at this debate that sort of faded from it that she's going to jump into that next debate in September. So get ready for Carly Fiorina. And I agree. I think if there was a winner tonight, it was John Kasich, the governor of Ohio. I think he came across as the adult in the room. His answers, they flowed well. There was a seam to him. And I actually think he had the line of the night tonight, which is, God loves me unconditionally, therefore, in the answer to the question about gay marriage and his daughters, therefore, I'm going to love my friends and my family unconditionally.
Okay, before we go, got to ask you about Jeb Bush.
I think he didn't do a lot to ultimately distinguish himself, which is kind of, I think, what he needed to do to get some kind of momentum.
I'll take it a step further. I think Jeb Bush is no longer the inevitable candidate that everybody thought he was. I think of anybody on that stage tonight that didn't do what they were supposed to do at all, it was Jeb Bush. He's going to need every dollar of his $100 million in this course of this race because he just lost any veneer of inevitability coming out of here.
As we come on the air in the West tonight, it's great to have you with us. And as we begin tonight, our team is on the ground in Cleveland, and the Republican team is on the stage. The first big debate now underway. This video coming in late today before it all began. Donald Trump touching down, the man to beat, well ahead in the polls. Saying he's no debater, our Tom Llamas asked, did you prepare at all? And take a look at the lineup. The 10 contenders who made the cut tonight sparring in the same arena. Donald Trump and Jeb Bush, by the way, center stage. So let's get straight to Tom Llamas on the ground in Cleveland with the first highlights coming in now. Tom?
David, good evening. We're just behind the debate stage here in the press center as it's getting underway, and there is excitement in this arena. Usually it's for the Cavaliers and King James, but tonight it's for the Republicans, and all eyes on Donald Trump. Will he falter? Will he fight? And can anyone break through? Tonight, the top 10 GOP candidates taking the stage for their highly anticipated first debate. Donald Trump wasting no time during the debate, responding to the first question that he is not ruling out an independent run.
And that experts say an independent run would almost certainly hand the race over to Democrats and likely another Clinton. You can't say tonight that you can make that pledge.
I cannot say. I have to respect the person that if it's not me, the person that wins. I can totally make that pledge. If I'm the nominee, I will pledge I will not run as an independent.
This afternoon, Trump Force One landing just hours before the debate, carrying not only the Republican frontrunner, but the entire Trump clan.
Welcome to Cleveland. Is it true you did not prepare? I'm not too, well, let's put it this way. I've been preparing all my life. We have to make our country great again. That's what we have to do. We have to make America great again.
What's it like to have the bullseye? His closest competition, Governor Jeb Bush, earlier reaching out to a higher power.
This is the main way I plan is pray to my Creator.
Yeah, and so are you excited? Are you nervous? It's been a while since you've been on the debate stage.
No, none of that stuff matters. I'm going to speak from my heart, talk about my record. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
ABC News tracking all the candidates, some spending time with family, taking time out for supporters, and like Governor Chris Christie, who barely cracked the top 10, on the move today.
How are you? You gotta be ready.
David, this is the largest live audience for a Republican presidential debate. 5,000 people are inside this arena. It's going to get loud. At one point, Fox News considered using the NBA buzzer to cut off candidates when they went over time. Thankfully, they're not going to do that. David?
Tom Llamas tracking down the candidates for us today. Tom, thank you. And let's get right to ABC's chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, who is inside the arena tonight. And, John, so much talk about Trump being the target, but there's somebody else on that stage candidates might be going after?
Well, David, for all the talk about the bullseye being on Donald Trump, talking to the campaigns, I see no candidate coming into this debate trying to pick a fight with Donald Trump. He may be the obvious frontrunner right now, but they don't see him as ultimately having a chance to win the nomination. They will be going after Jeb Bush. If it's 9-1 in this debate, the one under attack is much more likely to be Jeb Bush, still seen as the man to beat.
All right, watching out for Jeb Bush tonight. John Karl, thanks for that. Let's get right to one other question tonight with ABC's political analyst Matthew Dowd. Donald Trump said just in the last week, Matthew, this about debating. I want to remind everyone at home.
I've never debated before. I'm not a debater.
I'm not a debater, he says. I've never been in a debate before. What do you make of this?
I think that's probably an accurate statement because he's much more used to giving orders in his previous life.
Just delivering it out there.
Just telling people what it is.
When he says no debate prep, because you've prepped candidates for years before you became our analyst here, do you believe that there's been no prep here?
He's been prepped. What this is really about is lowering expectation. What every candidate wants to do, including Donald Trump, is lower expectations far enough so that then when the night comes like tonight, you can exceed them. And so the story is in the aftermath that you exceeded the lower expectations. That's exactly what Donald Trump's doing.
All right, Matt Dowd.
And then I watch this idiot Lindsey Graham on television.
He's a jackass.
And he calls me a jackass. He's a jackass.
Stay in the race. Just stop being a jackass.
The problem with Mr. Trump's language is it's divisive, it's ugly, it's mean-spirited.
I'm not a fan of Jeb Bush.
It's Jeb Bush.
He's stumbling. I don't know. I don't understand this man. He's stumbling like he's not even a smart person. On simple questions. What's going to happen when it's complicated? I call him the reluctant warrior. And perhaps warrior is not a good word because I'm not sure he's a warrior. Rick Perry should have to have an IQ test before getting on the debate stage.
He offers a barking carnival act that can best be described as Trumpism.
He put glasses on so people will think he's smart.
Donald Trump's candidacy is a cancer on conservatism.
What about Marco Rubio?
I think he's highly overrated. I don't think that the way he's behaved over the last few weeks is either dignified or worthy of the office that he seeks. We already have a president now that has no class. And by the way, I have much better hair than he does, okay? And you know it's my hair.
Truth. And finally, moderates have been now found to sell their weapons. In fact, there's accusations by the family of Steve Sotloff, who was recently killed by the barbarians. There are accusations that he was sold by moderate rebels to the jihadists. The Carnegie Endowment says there are no neat, clean, secular rebel groups. They don't exist. They reiterate that this is a very dirty war with no clear good guys on either side. The German ambassador to the U.S. has acknowledged this. The Germans are arming the Kurds. They're not sending anything into Syria. It's a mess. And they're concerned that the weapons they send into Syria will wind up in the wrong hands. Many former officials are very forthright with their criticism. According to the former ambassador to Iraq and Syria, our ambassador, he says, we need to do everything we can to figure out who the non-ISIS opposition is, because frankly, we don't have a clue. Think about this. We are voting or obscuring the vote in a spending bill to send $500 million worth of arms to Syria to people who we say are the vetted, moderate Syrian rebels. Well, guess what? One of the men with the most knowledge on the ground of this, who's been our ambassador to Iraq and Syria, says, we don't have a clue who the moderates are and who the jihadists are. And even if they tell you they are the moderates, oh, we love Thomas Jefferson. Give us a shoulder-fired missile. We love Thomas Jefferson. Can you trust these people? The rebels have been all over the map. There's said to be 1,500 different groups. It is chaos over there. We will be sending arms into chaos. The largest coalition is the Free Syrian Army. I say largest coalition, really all the Islamic fronts, al-Nusra, ISIS, al-Qaeda are all much bigger than the Free Syrian Army, but the biggest group that we give to is the Free Syrian Army, who currently has 3 different people who claim to lead the Free Syrian Army. We don't even know who's in charge of the Free Syrian Army. They voted out one guy and in another guy, and he didn't even know they were voting. There are estimates that half of the Free Syrian Army has defected, many of them to al-Nusra and to al-Qaeda and to ISIS. These are the people your representatives are going to vote to send arms to. Half of them have defected. Half of them are now fighting with the jihadists. We've proven time and again that we don't know how to vet these leaders. Two groups that were initially provided U.S. aid and help last year are good examples. A top official of Ahrar al-Sham, one of the largest rebel groups at the time, announced publicly that he now considers himself to be allied with al-Qaeda. Just yesterday, our ambassador, our most recent ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, said that the moderate forces and will tactically ally with al-Qaeda, with al-Qaeda-linked Nusra. Listen carefully. Your representatives are sending $500 million to people who will tactically ally with al-Qaeda. So we asked them, I asked Secretary Kerry yesterday, I said, where do you get the authority to wage this war? And he says, from 2001. Some of the people fighting weren't born in 2001. Many of the people who voted in 2001 are no longer living. We voted to go to war in Afghanistan, and I supported going into that war because we were attacked and we had to do something about it. But the thing is, that vote had nothing to do with this. Absolutely nothing to do with this. You are a dishonest person if you say otherwise. That sounds pretty mean-spirited. Hear it again. You are intellectually dishonest if you argue that something passed in 2001 to do with the people who attacked us on 9/11 has anything to do with sending arms into Syria. It's intellectually dishonest, and to say otherwise, you are an intellectually dishonest person. And I said it frankly yesterday. Mr. President, what you're doing is illegal and unconstitutional. The response from Secretary Kerry was, we have Article 2 authority to do whatever we want. It's absolutely incorrect. We give power to the commander-in-chief to execute the war, but we were explicit that the wars were to be initiated by Congress. There was debate over this. There are Thomas Jefferson reports of his opinion about how this is the legislative function. There are letters in the Federalist Papers from Madison talking about how they precisely took this power from the executive and gave it to the legislative body. We hear, oh, we'll do something in December. What happens between now and December? An election. The people of this body are petrified, not of ISIS, but of the American voter. They're afraid to come forward and vote on war now. We should have a full-throated discussion of going to war, but we shouldn't put it off to December. Secretary Kerry was asked, will there be Sunni allies in this war on the ground fighting to overturn ISIS? The ones precisely maybe who've been funding it, such as Saudi Arabia, who should be the first troops in line receiving the first volley, should not be U.S. GIs. They should be Saudi Arabians, Qataris, Kuwaitis, and Iraqis. But they shouldn't be Americans. According to the Washington Free Beacon, some of the people that we've been supplying and some of the people we continue to supply arms to aren't so excited about Israel. Surprise. One of them remarked this. He said that their goal is to topple Assad, but when they're done with Assad, their goal is the return of all Syrian land occupied by Israel. So mark my words, I said the great irony here would be that someday our dollars and our weapons would be used against us and Israel. They will. We will be fighting, if we get over there with troops on the ground, against arms that we supplied to feckless moderate rebels that were immediately snatched and taken by ISIS. We'll be fighting our own weapons. And mark my words, if these people get a chance, they'll attack Israel next. These are among the many problems that I have in arming the Syrian opposition. Who are we really arming? What will be the result? Where will the arms end up? There are too many here that believe the answers to these questions, and when they do not indeed, when all indicators are otherwise, or maybe when it's unknowable, they continue to believe something that's frankly not provable and not true. I'm a skeptic of this administration's policies, But this is a bipartisan problem. This is not a Republican or a Democrat problem. This is a bipartisan problem. I do share the administration's belief that the radical jihadists in this region are a threat to America. But they need to think through how we got here. Radical jihad is run amok in the Middle East because intervention has toppled secular dictators. There weren't radical jihadists doing much of anything in Libya until Gaddafi was gone. He kept them in check. Was Gaddafi a great humanitarian? No. He was an awful despot. But his terror was on his own people, not the United States. The people in charge, if you can say anybody's, their terror is to be exported. Some of them are fighting in Syria. Where I differ with this administration is whether to arm the same side as the jihadists. We will be in a war on the same side as the jihadists. They say, oh no, we can make it a three-way war. War is very confusing, but can you imagine we're going to be in the middle of a three-way war where many analysts say when you're in the trenches, when the so-called moderates that your money's going to buy arms for, when they're in the trenches, they are side by side with al-Nusra. They are side by side with al-Qaeda. Do you want your money and your arms being sent to support troops that are fighting alongside al-Qaeda? Here's the great irony of this. The use of force resolution that they predicate this whole thing upon from 2001 says that we can fight terrorism. They've interpreted that to be al-Qaeda and associated forces. Well, guess what? The moderate rebels are fighting with al-Qaeda. We could use the 2001 use of authorization of force. As Secretary Kerry understands it, we could use that authorization of force to attack the same people we're giving the weapons to. Think about the insanity of this. We're giving weapons to people fighting in trenches with al-Qaeda, and if you interpret the use of force resolution as the Secretary Kerry does, we could actually attack, under that formulation, we could attack the very people we're giving the weapons to. It's absurd. We shouldn't be fighting alongside jihadists. This administration and its allies have been really on both sides of this civil war. It's messy, it's unclear. There are bad people on both sides. We need to stay the heck out of their civil war. I've opposed them for reasons that I think are becoming clear and that I think the American people will understand. It's not that I'm against all intervention. I do see ISIS as a problem. ISIS is now a threat to us. But I see our previous policy as having made it worse. I supported the decision to go into Afghanistan after 9/11. There are valid reasons for war. They should be few and far between. They should be very importantly debated, not shuffled into a 2,000-page bill and shuffled under the rug. When we go to war, it's the most important vote that any senator will ever take. Many on the other side have been better on this issue. When there was a Republican in office, there were loud voices on the other side. I see an empty chamber. There will be no voices against war because this is a Democrat president's war. That is something, the hypocrisy of that should resound in this nearly empty chamber. Is that where are the voices on the other side who were so hard on George Bush, who actually, by the way, actually did come to Congress, and we voted on an authorization of force. Agree or disagree, we did the right thing. But now we're going to fight the war for 3 or 4 months, see how it's going, see how the election goes, and then we're going to come back and maybe we'll talk about the use of authorization of force, maybe we'll have amendments. Colin Powell wrote in his autobiography, he said, war should be the politics of last resort. And when we go to war, we should have a purpose that our people understand and support. I think that's well thought out. I think he had it right. America should only go to war to win. We shouldn't go to war sort of meandering our way through a spending bill. War should only occur when America's attacked, when it's threatened, or when our American interests are threatened or attacked. I've spent about a year, and I'll probably spend a couple more years, trying to explain to the American people why Secretary Clinton made terrible decisions in Benghazi, not defending the consulate. Not the night of, not the day after, not the talking points, the 6 months in advance when security was requested. And this is one of the reasons it persuades me that as reluctant as I am to be involved in Middle Eastern wars, that we have to do something about it. We have to either leave Iraq or we have to protect our embassy, protect our consulate. So I think there are valid reasons for being involved. And I think we are doing the right thing, but just in the wrong way. If you want to have less partisan sniping about war, if you want to unify the country, think back to December 8th, 1941. FDR came before a joint session of Congress, and he said, "This day will live in infamy." And he united the country. People who had previously been opposed to war and said, "We can't stand this attack. We will respond. We will be at war with Japan." He didn't wait around 4 months. He didn't wait and say, let's wait till the midterm elections, and then we'll come back maybe in the lame duck, if there is a lame duck, and maybe we'll discuss whether or not the Japanese should be responded to. War's a serious business, but we make it less serious by making it political, hiding and tucking war around, tucking war away into a spending bill. We make it less serious. We don't unify the public. And then, as ISIS grows stronger or they're not quelled by sending arms to feckless allies in Syria, then what happens? Then they come back again and again. There's already the drumbeat. There's already those in both parties who insist that we must have American GIs on the ground. I'm not sending any American soldiers. I'm not sending your son, your daughter, or mine over to the middle of that chaos. The people who live there need to stand up and fight. The Kurds are fighting, seem to be the only people that are really capable or willing to fight for their homeland. The Iraqis need to step up and fight. It's their country. If they're not going to fight for it, I don't think we need to be in the middle of their fight. Am I willing to provide air support? Am I willing to provide intelligence and drones and everything we can to help them? Yes, we've been helping them for 10 years. We have a lot invested. So I'm not for giving up, but it is their war and they need to fight. And I expect the Saudis to fight, and the Qataris, and the Kuwaitis. Even our own State Department says there's no military solution here that's good for the Syrian people, and that the best path forward is a political solution. You know, is someone going to ultimately surrender? Is one side going to wipe out the other? Part of the solution here is that civilized Islam needs to crush radical Islam. Civilized Islam needs to say to radical Islam, this does not represent our religion, that the beheading of civilians, that rape and killing women does not represent Islam. The voices aren't loud enough. I want to see civilized Islam on the front page of the newspaper, international TV, saying what they will do to wipe out radical Islam. I want to see them on the front lines fighting. I don't want to see them sipping tea or in the discotheque in Cairo. I want to see them on the front lines fighting a war to show the Americans, to show the world that there is a form of civilized Islam that doesn't believe in this barbarity. The U.S. should not fight a war to save face. I won't fight to send our young men and women to sacrifice life and limb for stalemate. I won't vote to send our nation's best and brightest to fight for anything less than victory. When American interests are at stake, it is incumbent upon those advocating for military action to convince Congress and the American people of that threat. Too often the debate begins and ends with a conclusion. They say, well, a national interest is at stake. That's the conclusion. The debate is a national interest at stake? Is what we're going to do work? You would think we would debate for days and this chamber would be full. Before I came here, I imagined that when war was discussed, everybody would be in their desk and there would be a discussion. Hour on end on whether or not we would go to war. No, it seems to be some sort of geopolitical chess game or checkers. Oh, let's throw some money. What's 500 million? Which is yet another problem around here. But when we go to war, the burden of proof lies with those who wish to engage in war. They must convince the American people and convince Congress. Instead of being on television, the president should have been before a joint session of Congress. And I would have voted to authorize force, but it needs to be done according to the Constitution. Not only is it constitutional, there is a pragmatic or a practical reason why the president should have come to us. It galvanizes people. It brings people together. Both sides vote for the war, and it's a war of the American people, not a war of one man. This war will be a war until there's a vote, if there ever is one. This is one man's war. Our founding fathers would be offended, would be appalled to know that one man can create a war. We were very fearful of that. That's why we came from Europe with constant war, where brothers fought cousins and fathers fought sons, where everybody was related, all the royalty were related, and they fought continuously. We didn't want a king. We wanted the people through the Congress to determine when we went to war. This president was largely elected on that concept. I didn't vote for the president, but I did admire when he ran first for office. He said that no president should unilaterally take a country to war without the authority of Congress. That's what President Obama said. He was running against the wars of the previous administration, and people voted for him for that very reason, and he became part of the problem. He now does everything that he criticized. It's what the American people despise about politics. And when they say we have a 10% approval rate, Republican or Democrat, it's because of this hypocrisy, because we don't obey the law, because we don't engage in important debate, and because we stuff war and shuffle war into a spending bill. Bashar Assad is clearly not an American ally. He's an evil dictator. But the question is, will his ouster encourage stability, or will it make the Middle East less stable? With his ouster, will that mean ISIS replaces him? What are the odds that the moderate rebels that have lost every battle they've ever engaged in will be the rulers in Damascus? If we succeed in degrading Assad where someone can get to him, it will be ISIS. We will have ISIS in charge in Syria. It will be worse. We have to ask, are these Islamic rebels our allies? I'm reminded of the story of Zarkis el-Zakhem. He lived in a city called Malula in Syria. They speak Aramaic there. It's one of the few remaining villages in the Middle East where they speak the language that Jesus spoke. As the marauding Islamic rebels came into town, on the same side of the war, who knows who funded them or where they got the arms, but the Islamic rebels, as they came and marauded into town, Zarkis el-Zakhem stood up. He's a Christian. He lives on the side and sides with Assad. Most of the Christians side with Assad. So Zarkis el-Zakhem lives in Malula, speaks Aramaic, and he stands up and he says, I am a Christian, and if you must kill me, do it. And these were his last words. I don't know who these rebels were, but they're fighting on the same side that we're arming, and we don't know who they are. Our former ambassador to Iraq and Syria says, we have no clue who the non-ISIS rebels are. So for all we know, the rebels that killed Zarkis el-Zakhem could well be part of the so-called vetted opposition. When they win, will they defend American interests? Will they recognize Israel? You want to have a good question? Why don't we ask the vetted, moderate Syrians, how many will recognize Israel? I'm guessing it's going to be a big goose egg. There's not one of those jihadists, not one of those so-called moderate rebels that will recognize Israel, and if they win, they'll attack Israel next. Several of the leaders have already said they would. Will they acknowledge Israel's right to exist? Will they impose Sharia law? You know what's in Sharia law? In Sharia law is the death penalty for interfaith marriage, death penalty for conversion, apostasy, death penalty for blasphemy. In Pakistan right now, a country that billions of your dollars flow to, that the vast majority of the Senate loves and will send billions more of your dollars if they can get it from you. In Pakistan, Asia Bibi sits on death row. She's a Christian. You know what her crime was? They say blasphemy, but she went to drink from a well, and the well was owned by Muslims. As she was drawing water from the well, they began hurling insults